Today, we're going to look at a story where a good Samaritan had enough of a young thug disrespecting an 81-year-old veteran. This story is one of those where a punk gets more than he bargained for when he messed with the wrong person. It was just another day in town for Frank, an 81-year-old veteran who had served his country with honor many years ago. Now that he was retired, he liked to spend his days playing golf or fishing. But most of all, he liked to sit in his favorite diner, sipping his coffee and watching the world go by. It was there in the diner that Frank felt most at peace. One morning, though, everything changed. As he sat there enjoying his coffee, a young thug named Marcus approached his table. Without saying a word, Marcus slapped the elderly veteran across the face. The other patrons watched in shock as the veteran was knocked down and lay sprawled on the floor, his coffee spilling over him. But why would someone do this? What did the veteran do to deserve such treatment? As it turned out, nothing at all. Marcus was just a troubled young man who thought he was tough. He picked on the old man because he was weak and easy to intimidate. But what Marcus didn't know was that the veteran was not as helpless as he looked. After being knocked down by the young punk, the veteran slowly got up from the floor and brushed himself off. Despite the pain and humiliation he was feeling, he tried to make sense of what had just happened. Why would someone attack him without warning? As he looked around the room, he saw the other patrons staring at him with expressions of sympathy and anger. He knew he couldn't stay in that place anymore, so he slowly walked out of the diner, still trying to piece together what had just happened. Little did he know that someone was watching him leave, and they were very angry about what had happened. It was his son, Tommy, who had arrived at the diner just after the attack. He had come to pick his father up for their weekly fishing trip, but instead found his father being taunted by a group of onlookers. Tommy rushed over to his father, helping him up and asking what had happened. Frank explained what had occurred, but he was reluctant to get into it further. He didn't want to cause any trouble, and besides, it wasn't worth it. But Tommy wasn't having it. He was furious about what had happened to his father, and he wanted justice. He took out his cell phone and made a quick phone call. On the other end was his friend Big Paul, the president of the local Hells Angels motorcycle club. When Tommy told him what had happened, Paul didn't hesitate. He knew that the Angels had to do something about this. In no time at all, a group of burly bikers were roaring down the road on their motorcycles, heading straight for the diner, the sound of their engines echoing through the small town, sending a clear message that they meant business. As they pulled up outside the diner, the sight that greeted them was enough to make anyone angry. There was Marcus, the young thug, who had attacked the elderly veteran, along with a few of his equally unsavory friends. They were laughing and joking, clearly having a great time at the veteran's expense. But that was about to change. The Hells Angels confronted the group of thugs, their faces grim and their voices like thunder. The leader, Big Paul, stepped forward and demanded an explanation. The thugs were clearly intimidated, but Marcus was defiant. He didn't care who these bikers were or what they wanted. He thought he was the toughest guy in the room and was ready to fight. But when he heard what had happened, Paul's anger knew no bounds. He couldn't believe that someone would be so cruel as to attack an innocent elderly man, and he wasn't going to let it go unpunished. Paul turned to the veteran, who was still standing by his motorcycle. "Are you okay, sir?" he asked. The veteran nodded, still shaken, but unharmed. "Thank you for your service," Paul said, saluting the veteran. "We owe you one." Then he turned back to the thugs, and his voice was like ice. "You picked on the wrong guy today," he said. "Now you're gonna pay the price." And pay the price they did. The Hells Angels wasted no time in teaching the thugs a lesson they wouldn't forget. They beat them until they were black and blue, then threw them in the back of their van and drove them to the nearest jail. As for Marcus, he got off a little easier. Paul took him aside and gave him a talking to. "You need to learn some respect, kid," he said. "That man is a hero, and you should be ashamed of yourself for what you did." Then he handed the young man over to the police, making sure he would face charges for his actions. As the dust settled, the veteran stood there watching the Hells Angels drive away. He couldn't believe what had happened. He had never been in any trouble before, and he didn't want his son or anyone else to get hurt because of him. But he knew that sometimes you just can't avoid confrontation. When Tommy returned, he was shocked to see his father standing outside with a group of bikers. But when he heard what had happened, he knew that this was just the kind of justice his father deserved. From that day on, the veteran was treated like a hero in that town. Everyone respected him and nobody messed with him again. And as for Marcus, well, he learned a valuable lesson about respect and the importance of treating others the way you want to be treated. And here's another story of a veteran getting his revenge. And this next story is one of those where a veteran's patience finally runs out, and he decides to take matters into his own hands. It was just another day at the local Home Depot for Jim, a veteran who had served his country with honor many years ago. Now that he was retired, he'd like to spend his days working on home improvement projects. It was there in the store that Jim felt most at peace. One day, though, everything changed. As he was browsing the aisles, he noticed a young man eyeing him suspiciously. At first, Jim didn't think much of it. He figured the guy was just looking for something. But then the young man approached him and things started to get tense. The young man, whose name was Kevin, accused Jim of stealing something from him. Jim was shocked. He had never seen this guy before in his life, and he had no idea what he was talking about. But Kevin wasn't buying it. He was convinced that Jim had stolen something from him, and he was going to rest until he got to the bottom of it. Jim tried to explain that he hadn't taken anything, but Kevin wouldn't listen. He kept accusing Jim of being a thief and wouldn't leave him alone. Jim was getting angry. He was tired of this guy harassing him for no reason, so he decided to take matters into his own hands. With a calm and steady voice, Jim explained to Kevin that while he might be a veteran, he doesn't condone violence. He emphasizes that the best way to handle disagreements is through discussion rather than physical altercation. However, he also makes it clear that if provoked, he will not hesitate to defend himself. Kevin, feeling confident in his own strength, continues to provoke Jim, pushing him to a breaking point. In a moment of anger, Jim retaliates, knocking Kevin out cold with a single punch. Although satisfied with his actions, Jim is also disappointed in himself for resorting to violence. News of the incident spreads quickly throughout the community, leading to mixed reactions. Some people admire Jim's ability to stand up for himself, while others criticize him for using excessive force. Despite the criticism, Jim stands by his actions and refuses to apologize for defending himself. This story teaches us that while violence is never the ideal solution, it is sometimes necessary to stand up for yourself, and that even veterans are capable of great restraint and wisdom. And now we want to hear from you. What do you think?